All right, I am very happy today because my guest is Charles Tang, a serial entrepreneur that is currently the founder of Instant eStore. For those of you who don't know, Instant eStore is an all-in-one e-commerce solution that is currently serving thousands of clients. Thank you very much for being here with me, Charles.
Hey Kevin, how are you doing? Glad to be on the show.
Okay, perfect. The question that I always start with everyone that I have on is I'm always curious about the founding story and how people start the entrepreneurial journey in the first place. So take me back. How did you become an entrepreneur and how did you land on Instant eStore?
Right. Yeah, so I guess, for like a lot of people, my entrepreneurial journey started by accident, if you will, right? Two key events sort of changed the course of my life, literally. The first was when I went to study A-levels, in the UK, right? This was when, way back, when Sony first launched their PlayStation 1, if you can remember that long, right? So, Sony being a Japanese company, they used to just launch the games machine in Japan first, and they didn't launch it internationally until 1 year later. Okay, so being a teenager and loving to play games, obviously I knew when it was launched, so I was trying to buy in the UK. Right, I knew it was priced at $300 US. I think it was $299 US. And I saw an advert to sell the PlayStation 1 in the UK for a certain sum of money. So I called them and I asked them how much it was, and they told me it was £550, right? I mean, my math is not that great, but £550 does not equate to $300 US, no matter how you do it, right? So I was like, why is that such a big increase? And they say, obviously we got to import it and yada, yada, yada. So, but I saw that in the ad, they said wholesale inquiries welcome. Yeah. So I said, okay, fine. What if I buy wholesale? How much would it be then? So that guy told me if we bought wholesale, it'd be £350. Way more palatable. And the next question literally sort of changed got me into the entrepreneurial journey, right? So I asked him, how many units do I need to buy to qualify for wholesale? And he said two. So, 2 units, right? So it was I ordered 10 units on my credit card, and I advertised it for sale for 450. And the first one I pocketed £1,000, right? Extra pocket money. In the end, I think I managed to sell about 50 units of the PlayStation 1. So it started my entrepreneurial journey. But my life really changed when I then learned how to code and build websites. Yeah, I built websites to sell the PlayStation plus a few other things. It was during my first year summer holidays. Came back to Penang, and my cousin told me, I've got a friend who sells video CDs. Okay, so for those of you who are not well versed on what video CDs are, this is the precursor to Netflix, the precursor to DVDs. Okay, so these are like movies on video on CD-ROM format. Okay, it was very popular in Asia, but not elsewhere in the world. Yeah, so my cousin's like, my friend sells VCDs. Why don't you go talk to him and build him a site and make some extra pocket money? Yeah, so I went there, told him, why do you want to sell VCDs in Penang when you can sell it all over the world? Right. After talking to him for about 2 hours, he said, if it's so good, why don't you do it? I'll supply you and you sell it, online. So he gave me a stack of CDs, VCDs. And, for those of us who are in Asia, I need to add this caveat there, right? So these VCDs are original VCDs, not the pirated ones. Okay, very, very important.
There is a reputation amongst the VCDs. I'd say it's kind of like the street curb seller. Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. So these are the original licensed versions. Yeah. So he gave me a stack of those. I remember taking it and building the site overnight. Slept at 5 in the morning, right? And at 12 the next day, I woke up, checked my email, and lo and behold, I got 7 orders. 7 orders from people in the US who didn't know me. Okay, so just imagine that. I posted out at 5 in the morning, 12 in the afternoon. I got 7 orders. That rapidly it grew to 6 figures. We did more than 100,000 in the first month. Not the first month, after 3 months. Yeah, before I finished my summer holidays, we were doing 6 figures, more than $100,000 every single month. And I continued doing that even while I was studying in the UK. At the end of the first year, we were making something like about 6 point something mil revenue. Yeah. But that literally changed my life because, I've always been taught, you should study hard, go to a good university, get a good job so you can make some decent money, right? So I was like, bypassing the university and getting good job. But so I thought, I quit university and dove headfirst into this. Of course, when this took off, a lot of people then came to us and say, Charles, could you build this store for me? Could you build this store for me, right? After doing it a few times, that's when we realized, why do we want to recreate the wheel each time? So we'd rather just create a solution for people to use, point and click, and build the store themselves. And that is how Instant eStore was born. Yeah, we launched on a September the 12th, 2001. I remember because it's one day after 911. So yeah, we launched on September the 12th, 2001. And yeah, we've obviously grown since then. Yep.
Okay. So take me back to the part when you learned how to code. Did you study it in university, or did you just kind of pick it up on your own by having an interest in it?
Yeah, I mean, not at all. The thing is, I studied mechanical engineering in Imperial College, right? So during that time, they didn't really teach us programming at all. So it was just something that I took an interest in and I learned online. And I learned this language called Cold Fusion. Yeah, it was one of the early web application languages, and that enabled me to build, all the different things I've built so far. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's going back well before the days where you have all of these drag and drop, low code, no code sort of tools. It was a lot more. I would imagine the mechanical engineering, the logic structures of that lends itself well because you need to be able to have that sort of like format of frame of mind in order to be able to build it out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, although they didn't teach us coding per se, right? But how to think logically, how to think as a machine would think, because obviously you got to think of how loops within loops within loops, to do things, right? So that logical mindset frame has sort of helped me throughout the years, literally.
Okay. So I love the entrepreneurial journey because you kind of stumble into it just by the nature of some of your personal experiences with the Sony and then the VCDs and that sort of thing. But so now once you decided to launch Instant eStore, so you realized why reinvent the wheel every time. But when you go out to market and you start acquiring customers, what was the process to get those initial customers? Was it a lot of like close friends, family connections that were the initial testing group, or how did that begin?
Not at all, actually, because you got to remember this was way back in 2001, right? And I was based in Penang, right? So you can imagine in 2001, friends and family and close friends knew pretty much nothing about online selling. No one bought online. People in Malaysia just in that time, literally, you were just using Google to look for information. Not Google actually, using Yahoo to look for information. So not so much, but throughout the times that we've built websites to sell the various things, we managed to learn I managed to learn how to do search engine optimization, SEO. Yeah. So I knew how to get our sites to rank well. It was pretty easy before, obviously, not as advanced as the Google algorithm is nowadays. It was quite easy. So once you know a few tricks, it's easy to get ranked. So that was how we got our first clients, literally, because at one point we were ranked, I think, definitely the top 3 for quite a few years for the terms like e-commerce solutions or shopping cart software. So you can imagine those are pretty much key terms for what we're selling with Instant eStore.
Okay. And that initial traction. So you're based in Penang, but where did the traction come from? Was it global by default, or where was the most of the interest coming from?
Yes, you're right. I mean, it was definitely global by default, predominantly in the US. Yep. Our clientele was about 70-80% US, some in Canada and some in the UK. Asia, not so much. So for the first, I would say 5 to 8 years, it was pretty much in the US, UK, and Canada, with a few in Australia. Yeah, because this was during the early Web 1.0 days, where not everyone was a creator. The fact that you want to sell online means you are one of the early adopters. So these are people who are more DIY kind of basis. So this tends to be more, I'm generalizing here, but this tends to be more of a Caucasian culture. Asians, we love things to be done for us. Not so much we don't like to do things ourselves, right? So it's more of a DIY sort of culture. So in the early days, it was definitely in the England, well, in the Caucasian countries where it started. Yeah.
Okay. I do wonder, because you are going back a number of years into the beginnings here. So when you're talking about servicing these other countries, you run into a number of challenges in regards to being able to facilitate payments for services as well, because this predates Stripe, it predates a number of the services that we take for granted today.
Yes.
How did you work it out in those early days? I wonder.
Even in those early days, there were payment solutions, not many, granted, not many. In the early days, we were using a company called CC Now, Credit Card Now, CC Now. I don't think they exist anymore. But, they were one of the few companies or payment gateways that would accept clients from outside America, because obviously we were selling to clients in America, but our company was not incorporated in America. Yep. So our company is still incorporated in Malaysia. So they were one of the few ones that actually accepted foreign merchants. They then sort of dwindled off, and a new service called WorldPay. WorldPay. I think WorldPay still exists under RBS, right? So WorldPay came along, and we used WorldPay for quite a number of years. But you're right. I mean, this predates the days where now when you want to use a payment solution, it's like you don't know which one to choose because there's so many. Back then it was just one or two. And the thing is, for us back then was pretty much we need to make sure we keep our fraud rates low, because some people would just order and then file it as a fraud, right? If the fraud rate goes above a certain level, they cancel their account and they ban you. So imagine if you have only one or two providers and they ban you, you're pretty much out of business. So different times, different worries, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like for the fraud side, being a service provider from Malaysia a decade ago, do you feel like the location of incorporation played into that aspect of them being able to just say, I don't recognize this charge on my credit card, that sort of thing? Or do you think it was just kind of people gaming the system in the early days of the internet?
Yeah, I think, we were quite fortunate, to be honest. We were quite fortunate that our fraud rate was pretty low. Compared to when we were selling VCDs, our fraud rate was higher because obviously people like to order something, get the physical goods, and then say, I didn't order it, Whereas with precisely. Whereas with a service like Instant eStore, the people who sign up for Instant eStore, they don't do it on a whim, because, it's not something that, the normal person signs up for. So we were quite fortunate that our fraud rate was naturally low. And we were very, very mindful to use the payment name Instant eStore that they can recognize. Yeah. So of course we did have a few chargebacks, but most of the time it was due to a case of, I've forgotten to sign up for this. I didn't know it was this name. And most of the time we cleared up by just calling them and say, oh yeah, I'll just call my bank to cancel the chargeback. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So most of the growth came out of SEO, organic inbound traffic. Did you do much on the digital advertising side?
Yes, we did. But once again, you have to realize during the early days, the digital advertising tools were not as advanced as we have now. I remember using the search engine GoTo. GoTo was the first pay-per-click search engine, right? So we advertised there. That gave us a little bit of traction. And I think the early days, most of our traction came from the organic search engines, plus a little bit of site sponsorship. We did sponsor a few related news sites. Obviously, this was back during the days where the sponsors, I would just contact them or email them and say, I want to sponsor it, and they'll just quote you a flat sum a month. So like maybe $3,000, $4,000 US, right? And you have a banner stuck there, all the time. None of those rotation and stuff like that, right? So this was during the days where advertising was still very, very cheap. So we did do I would say 30% of our business came from digital advertising, whereas 70% came from search engines. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the specifics of the product itself and how that's kind of evolved over time, because obviously the speed of internet, the sophistication of expectations on behalf of consumers of what e-commerce ought to look like, all of that's evolved quite a bit over the course of these 10 years.
Definitely.
When you look at product evolution and continuing to do the development of it, what are the kind of the processes that you have in place to recognize when updates and improvements need to be done, and how do you kind of get those feedback loops internally developed as an organization?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, Kevin. Yeah, a pretty loaded one as well, actually. So basically, obviously, when we first built the solution, it was very, very simple. Literally, it helped you to build an online store. That's it, right? It connected to a payment gateway, and you can process the orders. That's it. Of course, along the way, a lot of requests come in where our clients want it to be integrated with shipping, for example, stock management systems, warehouse systems, and then later on to marketplaces and stuff like that. One of the key tenets that we always hold on to is if whatever is requested would be useful to help them to either grow their business or be more optimal, as in help with their operations, this is something we consider. So we put into the considered queue, right? So before we get it coded up, then we will get feedback from our clients. These are things that we're considering, vote on them. Yeah. So obviously the ones that are more popular, we work on it first, and so on and so forth. But one of the key things I would say, firstly, I'm a very frank person. So one of the key things I would say our missteps were, initially, we always thought we needed to build everything ourselves. If a client wanted this particular feature, right? Your programmers, right? Build it. Yeah. That's one of the missteps I feel, as compared to someone like Shopify, where they don't necessarily really build so many things themselves, but they build an API for other people to build things on their platform. So that was a key departure. And this is obviously hindsight 2020, right? So that was one of the key forks that we did not take. We tended to do things within the team. And if you ask me if we could redo things, wind back like 10 years or so, that's one of the directions I would take, to make it more of a platform and let other people do it. Because no matter how big a team is, right, there will definitely be more programmers outside than inside the company, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Unfortunately, hindsight is always 2020, so it's hard to have that clarity when you're in the moment, especially when you're the early player, opening up the space and working in it. It's hard to see the popularity of platform plays that came years later. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So let's keep on this aspect of building out the customer base and so forth. So as you went through the years, what do you see as the key growth drivers, and how do you kind of manage it? Because I'm gonna venture a guess and say that you have these ebbs and flows that happen with it. That one channel is doing well, and then it kind of softens up, and you got to push towards another one. How do you manage that over the course of time, over a number of years?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Kevin. But during the early days, obviously, we saw a lot of traction in the US, like I said, US, Canada, UK, Australia, stuff like that. And as times progressed and as competition grew fiercer, the people who signed up with us during the early days were, like I said, early adopters. Early adopters generally don't care that you're not in the country. You're in Malaysia, great. You're in Australia, who cares, right? No one cares, right? But as time passed by, where each country has their own e-commerce solution provider and stuff like that, so we find that the people who were signing up then were no longer early adopters, but they were the more of a mass market, right? So people in the mass market generally demand a certain higher level of service. For example, they want you to be local. They want 24/7 service and yada, right? So they feel more secure if they know that your office is somewhere nearby. Okay, so obviously we don't have offices all over the world. So we found that that kind of softened up. Yeah, but thankfully, obviously, this is also a time where e-commerce started to pick up in Malaysia. So, now we are a bit more focused in the Malaysian market, whereas previously we were not. Previously, all our clients were pretty much outside of Malaysia. So now we are looking towards Malaysian clients a bit more, and realizing that, this is a different breed of clients. Yeah. Obviously they're still DIY clients, but they don't really want to get down and dirty as much. Yeah. So obviously we need to add more automation and make things simpler and easier to use, and to cater to this mass market. Now, I would venture to say the people who are starting to sell online now, they are no longer in the mass market. They are actually the sort of late adopters already. Yeah. So these guys have even more of a challenge, I feel, to reach out to them, because the fact that they haven't signed on, a few years ago means that they are not as ready. So we find that with the current group of people, especially the bigger ones, we need to provide more of an advisory service to them. It's not just this is a solution, boom, get it done, right? But it's more towards we need to advise them. This is what you can do. They don't mind paying. That's good. That's the good part about it. They don't mind paying, but they want someone else to get it done for them, build it for them, and then they manage it. So they don't want to do the building. Yeah. So that's the trend that we've seen throughout the years.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you see some of the other trends that are out there? Because when you look at the West, you obviously saw the rise of Amazon, and they kind of shifted from control it to having third-party sellers onto their platform. Here in Southeast Asia, we have players like Shopee and Lazada. Obviously, they have some of their own issues, as anyone that's kind of dug into them can end up seeing. But you do see a number of these sort of like platforms, sell on our platform, those style of plays. The run my own store versus be on a platform, how have you seen that kind of evolve within the markets here?
Yeah, I think, definitely, especially in Asia. Number one, the Asian e-commerce scene started later than in the Western countries. And obviously by then, you would have some pretty strong players, really, like Amazon and stuff like that. So a lot of stronger, bigger marketplaces sort of sprouting up. So the Asian market got into e-commerce around the same time as when marketplaces became popular. Yeah. So that's why if you actually look at the number of independent stores in Asia, when I say independent, I mean independent websites as compared to selling in the marketplace, compared to the Western countries, in Asia is less, way less. It's a lower percentage compared to the Western countries, because pretty much of the timing. Yeah, because when they entered the industry, marketplaces were strong. And obviously with the marketplaces, the story is always very, very attractive in the sense that just post the products and people just buy without you doing any marketing. I mean, that's how the story goes. Yeah, that's how the story goes. Yeah.
They have an installed base of traffic and eyeballs that are coming in to be able to view it. So you don't have to go out and chase to get people to come to my site and be the discovery issue, essentially.
Yeah. But of course, the thing is, like I always say, every single a thing is a double-edged sword. Yeah. So marketplaces are good because they have traffic, but marketplaces are not good because they have competition. A lot of it. And perfect competition with the listing just right next to you. You know what I mean? So I always say to people, a lot of people ask me, Charles, should I be selling on Shopee, Lazada, or my own online store, or what have you? Okay. So I always answer that question with another question, right? My question is, imagine you're walking along the street and you see a 50 ringgit bill on the floor and a 100 ringgit bill on the floor. Which one do you pick up? Both, right? You don't just pick up a 100 ringgit bill, right? You pick up both, So the answer is not so much where should I sell here or there. It's not that you should be selling everywhere. Okay. And that is why, obviously with Instant eStore, we have also built integrations with the top marketplaces where, if you add new products to Instant eStore, obviously automatically it pushes the products to the marketplaces. Yeah. And if orders come in, obviously we pull the orders from the marketplaces to your store. So you have one central location to manage all your activity rather than having to manage multiple places. So it does the stock syncing as well. So, you never oversell that product. Yeah. Okay. So Instant eStore, if you will, we no longer call ourselves an e-commerce store provider, right? It's omni-channel commerce, yeah. So where it is one system to control your different channels where you sell, whether it's on the marketplace, your own online store, social media, Facebook Live, WhatsApp, what have you. So we have links to all of those. And when people place an order, always it all comes back to your store. So it becomes a central management system.
Okay, so you enable social commerce as well. So if somebody's selling via their WhatsApp channel or their Instagram feed, you're able to integrate across channels.
Yes, precisely. So we have various integration points. Obviously, one of them is a live, and you can do a Facebook Live. And we have a bot that handles comments, because normally how Facebook Live goes is if they're displaying something and say, if you're interested in this, comment A1, right? So anyone who comments A1, obviously the bot will recognize it, you send a message to the person with a link to purchase, stuff like that. Same thing happens during social sort of Facebook posts, when people comment a lot in Asia, in Malaysia especially, the most common comment is PM, PM, right? So rather than you having to answer the PM message, our bot does it automatically and send in the link by. So all those are built into Instant eStore as well. Yeah.
Okay. And the bot, did you guys build that out yourself, or did you use kind of like one of the pre-pack ones that, like, I know Facebook has like a pre-pack one. There's a few other ones that are out there in the market space.
Yeah, once again, we are engineers, so we built it ourselves. Maybe not the wisest choice. Well, I mean, we did use some of the Facebook technology. I think I can't quite remember the AI engine that we use is by Facebook, right? I can't quite remember the name now, but we use it to parse for the meaning of the message, right? But still, we build the plumbing and everything to make it work. Yeah. I guess that's a danger that I see, because you let a mechanic look at a car, they're like, okay, I can do this car. You know what I mean? But that may not be the best way to get a car. It might be better to just buy it. You know what I mean? So that is that slight danger that we constantly need to remind ourselves: do we need to build it, or can we, repurpose something that's already available and do a joint venture, or collab with another company? So this is one thing that we are way more conscious in doing now, because we realize, you can't afford to be an island during these days, right?
Yeah, it's easier said than done, a lot of that, in regards to saying, okay, it should be more of like a formatted buy versus build decision, but we're not quite able to easily analyze that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you then. So, like, what other integrations do you see as like the critical features that you guys have built out that really enables your service? So obviously this kind of omni-channel. You had mentioned reconciling with the stock.
Sure. Yeah.
What are the key features that when you talk about being kind of an all-in-one solution, what are those aspects?
Yeah, so basically an all-in-one solution just means that we integrate things or channels that will help you to sell different sales channels. That's number one. Things like marketplaces, like I said, mentioned just now, marketplaces, video, social, stuff like that. Obviously, we have a POS, a point of sale solution as well, because a lot of people still have physical stores. Yeah. So having a physical store that sort of syncs up with your online store makes sense, especially on the customer loyalty program kind of thing, right? Where no matter people buy in-store or online, they still get loyalty points, and they can, use the loyalty points to claim for things. Yeah, so that part is cool. In addition to that, obviously, we also integrate to make operations easier with regards to fulfillment. Yeah, so we are integrated with quite a few key fulfillment providers, whether they are third-party logistics companies or warehouses. So we even have sort of integrations with certain warehouse software that people would use to manage their own mini warehouse, if you will. Yep. So that is to help with operations. Obviously, we integrate with payment gateways. Just think about payment gateways, because we serve a worldwide market. Currently, we are integrated with more than 80 payment gateways all over the world. So you just imagine that just maintenance on the 80 payment gateways is a bit of a
Everybody has their own
yeah.
API that you're constantly having to make sure is refreshed and up to date and all of that kind of stuff.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So those are the main sort of features and functionality. Of course, going forward, look forward a little bit is one of the key things that we are launching very, very soon is a metaverse, an e-commerce metaverse that we call Universe. Yeah.
Okay.
It's YOU Universe, as in Universe, right? Where you'll be able to explore the 3D world through the game. And be able to play games and as well as browse products and buy the products. So these products, some of them will be virtual and physical at the same time. So imagine buying a pair of shoes that your avatar could wear immediately and having a real pair of shoes arrive like 3 days later. Yeah. So this is the bridging the divide between the virtual and the real world. So that's the next thing that we are launching very, very shortly, Universe.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because you've navigated through the different channels that e-commerce has penetrated, whether your website, the platform, social, etc. So now this is interesting, moving towards the metaverse and seeing it as being the next potential channel. So when you look at it, it's still a relatively new space. So when you're thinking about it, are you going after more of like the gaming segments, or where do you see that entry point in order to onboard onto that as an avenue?
Yeah, so the thing is, I've been speaking, obviously, because this is a new project, I'm speaking to all kinds of people, right? And a lot of times I say, no, we are starting a metaverse. And always when I say metaverse, one or two reactions happen. Number one, the first kind is, they have a bit of a glazed look and they nod their head. So, they don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. The second one is like, oh, interesting, the metaverse, right? So then they're trying to figure out what kind of metaverse you're doing. Okay. So the way we look at it right now, people that we've been speaking to, people who are maybe 30 years and below, younger than 30 years, right? They tend to get the metaverse idea pretty immediately. So when we tell them, this is what you can do in the metaverse, obviously you can play games, hang out with friends and buy things, so it's literally a universe that you spend time in virtually. So they get that. Yeah. Obviously with the slightly older demographic, I'm 45 this year. So it's my demographic is the same in the older demographic, right? So when I tell my friends about it, they'll be like, why would you want to do it? You know what I mean? So we do realize that this is definitely something that will be popular in the future. Yeah. How far in the future? Hard to tell. So right now, you are right in saying that because we are targeting a slightly younger demographic, anywhere from maybe 15 to 30 years old, it's not going to be just pure commerce, because if it was, I think it's not going to do very, very well. So that's why we are very mindful to mix it with fun things to do, fun games you can play and explore. Obviously, we have NFTs inside that as well. So the thing is, with NFTs, they have been having a bad rap, previously, right? Or even right now, you know what I mean? So the thing, some people say, NFTs are great. Some people are like, what's the point? Why would I buy an NFT when I can buy a physical? Why would I want to buy an NFT of an image where I can get a physical photo, right? A physical painting. But the thing is, the way we see it, these questions crop up because it's still very, very early days. I remember the days when we started, selling things online, and a lot of people didn't see the point of that.
Sure.
Right? So we see this same trend over and over again when something new, a new technology is introduced. You always have what we call the initial exuberance, right? And that leads to a bubble. And sooner or later, the bubble will pop. Obviously, in the crypto industry, it popped, and the popping is quite drastic, obviously.
A few pops, I think.
Yes, precisely. So
I would say it keeps going. It keeps going. Yeah.
Precisely. But the thing is, what's interesting is what happens after it pops. So just like the .com boom and then the .com bust, the real services that we're using today, even today, were built during the bust days, not during the boom days, but during the bust days, because when the market is a bit cooler, that's when, people have a bit more time to think, because you actually need to think of something useful. Because during a boom time, you can throw anything online, and you'll be valued at a high value, right? At a high valuation. But during these cooler winter markets, that's when you really need to sit down and think, what is the real value proposition here? Why would someone want to do it, right? So I'm hopeful and optimistic that although it's a bit of a crypto winter, but this is a good time to do some serious building. Not the best time to raise, but a good time to build. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the space has lost some of its heat, let's say.
Yes. Yeah.
But I do agree that, like, oftentimes when you're talking about building something, you fall into one of two buckets, and I've heard a number of venture folks out there say this. So I certainly didn't coin it, but they say, when you're looking at investing into a startup, you're either going to invest too early, or you're investing way too early.
That's a good one.
So I think there's something that plays into that when you're trying to figure out where are things moving to. Going on selling online, same thing. People are skeptical about it. Talking about selling through social media. Why am I going to buy through something from some random 18-year-old with a feed? Oh, because they have 50 million followers and a lot of traction. So it's like, in hindsight, it starts to make sense. And it's more of like, where are people spending their time, and trying to understand how to tailor it to the experience that's associated with it. Yeah.
Precisely. I think that was the main reason why we started Universe, to be honest, right? I remember it was maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, definitely about 2 years ago, during the initial onset of the pandemic, where, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, so she was 12 then. And I remember, because obviously she was doing online learning at home, right? And I go to her bedroom and I see she's talking to her friends in front of the computer. I was like, what are you doing? I'm hanging out with my friends. I was like, are you chatting? Oh, no, we're hanging out in a game, right? A game called Roblox. Yeah. She was 12, and I mean, everyone plays Roblox, right? Every kid plays Roblox.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, so what do you do in the game, right? Because we're used to games having a mission, for example. But the games I used to play, you're gonna save the princess or kill the evil general, stuff like that, right? So she's like, yeah, we just walk around. I was like, that's not a game. You know what I mean? They're just walking around and talking, right? There's no real structure to it. At first I didn't understand it, right? And what she said just changed my mind, because she says, you hang out with the friends by going to a cafe and sit down and talk. And this is our way of hanging out. Yeah. When they hang out physically, that's when it gets a little bit awkward. You have a group of people who always hang out and play Roblox, right? You put them around a table, take away the devices, they'll be like, it's as if they don't know each other, right? You give them the devices, and then, wow, they are back in it again. Because I then realized this is how the younger generation, they communicate with other people. Because when I'm just sitting in front of you, let's say I don't have a common topic of conversation, it makes it awkward. Right. So we talk about the weather, we talk about, common things. Yeah. So for them, instead of talking about the weather, they're in the game. They're doing something together. Right. And from there, the point of conversation just naturally flows. So I always say, people in our generation, we spend a lot of time online, whereas for my daughter and her generation, they spend a lot of time in game. Yeah. So realizing that, and that's where people are spending the time, it made sense for us to build the metaverse, and try to get there a bit earlier. We realized we are early, but once again, I think it's when it's early that the playing field is more level. Because imagine if something is really well trodden, it'd be very, very hard for a startup to penetrate the field, because you have all the big boys with a lot of money thrown in there, right? So yeah.
Okay. So when you look at this is more of like a long game. So you're basically looking at it and planning for the future. But do you have any sort of specific expectations in regards to like what you define as success from like milestone to milestone, or is it more of like build it, continue to focus on it, and just see where the system goes?
I think obviously, we do have internal milestones that we are looking to achieve, because if we didn't have that, then it'd be very hard to classify whether it's a success or a failure. If you don't measure it, it's very hard to classify it, right? So we do have internal milestones in the sense of how many users we aim to onboard into the system, and that's obviously milestone number one, right? We have a milestone that month 3, month 6, month 12 after launch. We have milestones there, and the onboarding is just the first step of it. The second step is arguably even more important than that is how many people are coming back, right? Because a lot of times it's easier to get people to try a system, but not as easy to get them to come back if it's not good. Okay, so for us, is these two key sort of milestones that we are focusing on: how many people get on board to the system, and what percentage of people can we get them to come back and continue to use it? Because unless they spend time in the universe, because this universe is not a transactional place. It's not like a online store that you go in, buy, and then get out of there, right? So if anything, this is more along the lines of a social media, as if you will, or a marketplace with more social media side, right? Where you tend to spend a bit more time there. Yeah. So for us, those two key metrics are important.
Okay. Do you see that at some point the metaverse is going to have digital replicas of physical stores, to where like the storefront, for lack of a better way of putting it, is inside of the metaverse in some shape or form that's familiar? Do you think it's going to be entirely different, experiential, whatever the case may end up being, or is it too early to tell what it's going to look like?
Well, I think, right now, like I say, it is a bit early, but, there are a few things I can imagine happening. Once again, I don't think the metaverse should be 100% realistic, because let's put it this way, right? You want realism, there's nothing realer than the real world. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the fun part about being in a game is you can do things you can't do in real life. So it has to have that, it has to straddle the divide between realism and a form of escapism, right? So I do envision physical stores having their storefronts in the metaverse. But if you ask me, will they just have that and not have the physical versions? Right now, my answer is no, because obviously it takes quite a bit of time to transition. And these guys who are like 15, 20 years old need to grow up to be like 30 years old and 30, 40 years old, right? Before it becomes really, really mainstream. Yeah. So the short answer to that is it will be a dual system for now, but eventually I would imagine having it in the metaverse makes sense, because you can then have the full experience, the physical experience of a store that's could be in a country, for example. Because right now, if we wanted to visit a flagship store in Paris, for example, I need to physically fly there. Obviously, in a few years' time, I mean, now the technology is not too bad, but in a few years' time, technology will improve, where the experience will obviously be elevated. So then I can experience the full breadth of it, even though I'm sitting, in a small little apartment in Penang, for example. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I love kind of the speculation on what the future is going to hold, and start planning around it. But let me wrap up here, because this is super interesting. But let me wrap up here with the standard questions that I ask everyone. And so for you, what is the tech tool that you just can't live without?
Right. I'm going to be boring here. It's going to be my iPhone. So as a consumer, it's the iPhone. As a more of a tech person, I'm still pretty much of a coder as well. So one of the things I fire up every single day is Sublime Text. So it's one of the text editors that we use. I can't live without it. So these two tools, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. And so last question here is, if you were to talk to another founder that's just getting started out, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you could offer? I mean, coming from a serial entrepreneur, knowing what you've gone through, what piece of advice could you offer?
Yeah, I think there are two kinds of people that I meet. Because I also do quite a few sort of mentoring mentoring sessions with startup founders. And there are two kinds of startup founders I see. The first kind are people who want to build a startup. Okay. Once again, I didn't want to build a startup, right? I was just solving a problem. And I built a startup in the process of solving the problem. Yeah. So for those kind of people, I would say focus on what are the real problems or things you can potentially do to make someone's life better. Don't focus so much on thinking I want to build a startup, right? But solve the problem first. The startup comes, as you solve the problem for people, right? So that's number one. And number two is for people who tend to overthink things a little bit. And I place myself in the second category a little bit now, is sometimes the more you know, the more you realize the less you know. You get what I'm saying? So you get a little bit like paralysis by analysis. Yeah. So most of the time, you really don't know what's going to happen in the future. Yeah, you can't control that. But what you can control is what actions you do today, right? So if you have an idea, definitely, test it out cheaply. Don't throw the farm at it, right? But test it out cheaply, and then see what the market tells you. A lot of people obsess about thinking what people would say, what people would do. You really don't know until you put it out into the market. Yeah. So it does come back to building a very, very simple MVP to test out your hypothesis. Yeah. So in short, just do it. Yeah, just do it.
Yeah. Like the Nike saying, just do it. You have to get out there. You have to get out into the market. You have to get the feedback. Otherwise, so many times, like an idea is great. Execution is what matters. And if you don't get out there and start working the market, putting a product out there, you don't really have anything.
Definitely.
Well, Charles, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time, having a chat with me. This has been great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, Kevin. It's nice chatting with you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.